Today is August 31st, 2023. I want to talk about the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. I want to talk about the ongoing Ukrainian offensive. Now that we're at the end of August, the beginning of September, within the first week of September, it will be a full 3 months since Ukraine launched its offensive. Let's go to the map, liveuamap.com. It is a pro-Ukrainian map, so keep that in mind as we look at it. And the overview here, we see a lot of these drone attacks by Ukraine continuing. I will get into that in just a moment about how effective they are and what impact they may have on the fighting, the conflict, the overall outcome of the conflict. We zoom in. And the primary front Ukraine is fighting along is here in Zaporozhye. They have two areas where they had been concentrating, here and here. And we're still getting updates from here. We're not hearing much about anything over here. And this is Robotyno. And this map, this particular pro-Ukrainian map has claimed that Ukrainian forces took Robotyno weeks and weeks ago. Ukraine only just this week claimed that they officially took control of it, but even that is contested. There is no confirmation that that has happened, but already this pro-Ukrainian map is claiming that Ukrainian forces are moving beyond. If you read it carefully, it says Ukrainian forces have success. I don't talk about the nature of that success in these directions, and we'll get back to this in just a moment. In the Donbas region, we actually see a lot of red rifle icons, which is this pro-Ukrainian map admitting that Russia is on the offensive. And I've talked about in previous updates how around Kupiansk, Russian forces are actually making progress toward this city that had been taken from them during Ukraine's fall offensive last year. And the Kharkov region, Russia is now taking that territory back. They are overturning the results of last year's offensive in the middle of Ukraine's offensive right now. Let's take a look at some articles discussing the situation on the ground, the nature of the fighting. Again, this is all from the Western media. This first one comes from Forbes, David X. It's titled, "Two Ukrainian air assault brigades are flanking Russia's next strongpoint on the road to Melitopol." And these two brigades are basically what's left of the very large, you're going to hear between 9 to over 20 brigades were prepared for the offensive. They're down to these two brigades. They have admittedly gone through several brigades just trying to get to Robotyno. The article says, a week after liberating Robotyno, again, this is Forbes, David Axe, saying this happened last week when Ukraine itself is only making announcements this week. A week after liberating Robotyno, a key strong point on the road to Melitopol in Russian-occupied southern Ukraine, Ukrainian brigades are now shifting their attention to the next town along the same axis, Nova Prokhovka. These names are very difficult to pronounce. If I'm pronouncing them incorrectly, I apologize. So again, he's claiming that Robotyno was taken a week ago, so he's already off to a very bad start, giving readers a clear and accurate picture of what is happening on the ground. Then he says, the brigades are pivoting east toward the town of Verbove. Their goal apparently is to liberate Verbove in order to flank Nova Prokhovka. It's a sound strategy after all. It worked before for the Ukrainians in several key engagements since they launched a sweeping counteroffensive starting in early June. But since Robotyno is the first main objective that they had, and it's taken them 3 months to reach it, I would not say that that is a sound strategy that has worked for them before. Quite the contrary. It has been a complete catastrophic failure. They have bled their offensive potential dry just to take Robotyno. And let's go back to the map and see how much further they actually have to go. They are here right now where these blue rifle icons are. Let's be generous and say that that's where they are now. They still need to get to the Sea of Azov down here. They started here. From here to here, they still need to get all the way down to here. And so that's quite a distance to go. They're actually attacking in this direction towards Melitopol. They have to get through Tokmak and several other towns and small cities. They also have to get through multiple layers of Russian defenses, the first of which they have not yet breached. Just to give you an idea. And so what they're talking about in Forbes is that they're claiming they took Robotyno. They're coming from north to south. They took this town, or even hamlet, you could call it. Now they're saying they're trying to take this town, but maybe they're going to go east, hook around, and then flank it. That's what they're saying. And David Axe of Forbes is saying this is a sound strategy. And I would suggest that it is not sound at all. You're not taking the most direct path in the direction that you're trying to go in this offensive. This is what you would call a big arrow offensive. They're trying to move troops and equipment as quickly as possible toward their objective. That was the whole point. That's why we saw those fields of burning tanks and infantry fighting vehicles and armored personnel carriers. They were trying to move everything as quickly as possible to build momentum, rush through these defenses, and carry on as quickly as possible. They cannot do that. Clearly, they are getting destroyed in the process. So they're lingering in what is essentially a giant kill zone. They are being hit by Russian howitzers, multiple launch rocket systems, missiles, and a variety of drones. And the longer they sit out there, and if they're going to try to move laterally to try to flank a town or city, in addition to trying to move forward, they're just lingering out in this kill zone longer. And that is what's bleeding dry Ukraine's offensive potential. In this article, David Axe repeats all of these claims again about Ukraine taking out 3 or 4 Russian artillery pieces for every one Ukraine loses. I've gone over this before, how this may have happened several times on a very localized basis. But as Russia moves in reserves to balance the odds, they lose this advantage. And this is not a common thing happening along the line of contact. Even if it were true, though, Russia has many more artillery pieces. They can afford to lose them. Ukraine cannot. So again, this is a war of attrition. If you're trading your men and your equipment in for territory, that is you pursuing a strategy toward defeat, not victory. He also claims that for every Ukrainian vehicle destroyed, they're also destroying a Russian vehicle. They provide no evidence at all. They don't even link to a baseless claim. They're just stating this as if it's fact. And then they claim that this is fantastic because usually when you're on the offensive, you lose more. You lose more troops and equipment than the defender. All very questionable. And then the article says what the Russians might do to counter this momentum that Ukraine is building up in this offensive at month 3, third month, going to month 4 now. The Russians could shift forces to Verbove in order to try blocking the 46th and 82nd Brigades assault. They also could assign to Verbove elements of the elite 76th Guard Air Assault Division, which the Kremlin apparently is rushing from eastern Ukraine to the south in a desperate bid to stabilize the front line. And if you go to this article, there is a link here. The work cited regarding this claim, and if you click on it, it just brings you to another David Axe article published by Forbes, and it says, as Ukraine's counteroffensive gains momentum, Russia is deploying some of its last good reserves. So they're claiming that there's this airborne unit being moved from the north where it's currently fighting down to the south because they're desperately trying to stop Ukrainian forces. Where is this claim coming from? What evidence is this based on? So they say the reinforcements are from the 76th Guard Air Assault Division, which is arguably Russia's best division and is relatively fresh, according to Rob Lee, an analyst with the Foreign Policy Research Institute in Philadelphia. He is one of these analysts that if you had been following him in the lead up to the offensive, you would now be shocked by how poorly Ukraine is doing, because they are often wrong about many things. And when I show you where he's basing this notion on, that Russia is moving these units from northeast to south, I think you might understand why all of these analysts collectively have gotten it so wrong for so long. There's another link. If you click on that, it brings you to a Twitter post. There's Rob Lee's Twitter post. He says, this indicates Russia has possibly committed multiple regiments from the VDV's 76th Air Assault Division to the south. So that's to Robotina from the Kremenna front. And he's saying that this is arguably Russia's best division and is relatively fresh. So who is he citing? This guy, Defman, who is a pro-Ukrainian commentator. Again, they're competing for the most frequent worst takes regarding what is happening in Ukraine. So what does he say? He says 73rd Maritime Special Operations Center souvenirs from 104th and 234th Guard Air Assault Regiment, 76th. And what is it? It's just a random photo with two patches allegedly from this unit held by a random unidentified individual at an unverified, unknown location. That is not evidence of anything at all. And David Axe of Forbes wrote an entire article about this. Rob Lee is suggesting to his audience that this is evidence that Russia has moved an elite unit from the Donbas region to Zaporozhye. I just thought I would show you, if you dig into these articles and try to follow these claims to their original source, just how little substance there is behind all of these claims. And this is why the Western media is so far off from reality. This is why these analysts are always so wrong. They're not basing anything that they're saying on actual evidence, solid evidence. I was just listening to a video by Alexander Mikuris about these drone attacks. A very large number of drones were involved in one of these recent attacks, and the vast majority of them were taken out either by electronic warfare or air defenses, Russia's extensive air defenses. One of the attacks did appear to get through. It is covered in an article here by Reuters. Ukrainian drones attacked Russian airbase near Estonia. And it says footage published by Pskov's governor on Telegram showed smoke rising from a large fire as the sounds of sirens and explosions rang out. Other reports on Telegram channels showed anti-aircraft systems in action around the city, which is just 32 kilometers east of the Estonian border. According to initial assessments, nothing serious has occurred, but it is hard to determine that at night. If everything is in order, the airport will resume normal operations on Thursday. That is the governor writing on Telegram, adding that there were no injuries. And indeed, just as he said, the images, satellite images, emerged of the airport following the attack, and the damage was very minimum. Now, Russian state media, TASS, reported initially that 4 aircraft were damaged. Later, that number was revised to 2, and it seemed as if the damage was very minor. And here's an article from Ukrainska Pravda. It's a Ukrainian, pro-Ukrainian source drone attack on Pskov's first satellite images of airfield. And what's interesting is you're looking at these images, these satellite images. Who provided these satellite images? Where were these first published? What is the source of these images? And the article actually says Radio Svoboda project exposing high-level corruption. Now, if you look at this logo, even if you can't read the Cyrillic here, Radio Svoboda, that is part of the Radio Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty. And if you go to the U.S. Agency for Global Media website, an official website of the U.S. government, here is the webpage for Radio Sloboda. So it is U.S. government-funded media. They are the ones who published these images. And even if you look at these images, and if you want to get a closer look, the link to this is in the video description. You can open it up on your own computer. The article even says, on the satellite image, we can see that the surface near the wings is damaged, and it's most likely that the drones tried to hit the fuel tanks located in that part of the aircraft. However, this still means that the aircraft will have to be taken out for major repairs, which will take at least 2 to 3 months. How they concluded all of that, I don't know. But that is minimum damage to 2 of these Russian Ilyushin IL-76 strategic airlifters. Russia has over 100 of these, so 2 with minor damage. That let's just give them benefit of the doubt and say, yes, it will take 2 to 3 months to repair these. Is this going to have any impact at all on Russian military operations, let alone the outcome of the conflict? No. And I want to really drive this point home, because this is the same reality reflected in all of these attacks, the futility of these attacks carried out by Ukraine. Here is Air Data News. This is an article from 2021. 50 years after first flight, the IL-76 is still being produced in Russia. And if you read through this article, it says the most modern facilities will allow for the production rate of 12 planes per year. And that is citing United Aircraft Corporation, which I assume is involved in making these airlift planes. In order for Ukraine to actually impact Russian military capabilities, they would actually have to be destroying, say, 2 or 3 or even 4 of these aircraft each attack several times a month for an entire year, and then maybe they might start impacting Russian military capabilities, both regarding the special military operation in Ukraine and other operations, say, in Syria, for example. The bottom line is that these drone attacks, however numerous they are, occasionally drones get through. They cause this type of damage. The Western media showcases it and points to it. It's meant to distract you away from the overall absolute failure of Ukrainian military forces as this offensive grinds on. It is not strategically relevant, however. It is not going to change anything about the outcome of this conflict. And this goes back to the point that this is a war of attrition. This is a war of attrition, and Ukraine and its Western sponsors do not have the ability to sustain this proxy war that they are waging against Russia. They do not have the ability to do that. And speaking of that, let's take a look at the most recent U.S. assistance package for Ukraine. This is dated August 29th, 2023. This is part of the Presidential Drawdown Authority, which means all of this is coming from existing U.S. stockpiles. It says right down here. Here is a list. I'm going to go over that list. The Presidential Drawdown Authority, taking it from existing stockpiles, differs from another process in which they draw up contracts with industry to have additional equipment manufactured and then eventually sent to Ukraine, which could take months, even years, to fulfill those contracts. So let's go through this list item by item. Notice that there are no quantities involved at all. They're not talking about quantities. If people have been following my updates where I've gone over a very large number of these assistance packages, in say the first year of the conflict, the US was actually listing quantities for all of these items. So number 1, AIM 9M missiles for air defense. These are usually air-to-air missiles, but they are also used for the NASAMS air defense system that the US has sent to Ukraine. What's interesting is I see no mention of Patriot air defense missiles. And I refuse to believe that Ukraine doesn't need more of these missiles. What's more likely is that they just don't have any to send Ukraine at this point. And I just want to remind people that even before the US even thought about sending Ukraine Patriot air missile systems, there had already been a critical shortage owed to Saudi Arabia's war with Yemen, the fact that they were using Patriot air defense systems, attempting and often failing to shoot down missiles and drones coming out of Yemen, demonstrating the lack of military industrial output to sustain large-scale use of this system, and also just the system's inability to intercept air threats, which was what it was supposedly designed to do. Next on the list, additional ammunition for high-mobility artillery rocket systems, HIMARS. No numbers are given to the number of rockets, guided rockets, GPS-guided rockets, to be more specific, sent to Ukraine. They have never really been big at telling you how many rockets are being sent to Ukraine. The number is not large. There were a small number of launchers sent to Ukraine, and a small number of guided rockets trickled into Ukraine. Ukraine is physically unable to launch more rockets because the US is not giving them an endless supply of rockets. And at this rate, they actually can sustain the use of HIMARS. The problem is it's just on too small of a scale to make any sort of difference. Next, 155 millimeter and 105 millimeter artillery rounds. Again, for the first year of this conflict, every time they sent artillery rounds, there was a number attached, a quantity attached, and they're no longer doing that because they no longer have large amounts of artillery shells to send Ukraine. It's not to trick the Russians. The Russians very obviously know how much artillery is being fired at them every single day. And they also have the means to gather intelligence. They don't have to wait for public Pentagon briefings to find out how many artillery shells the US has and is sending to Ukraine. Next on the list is mine clearing equipment. It's clear that not enough mine clearing equipment was sent to Ukraine to begin with ahead of the offensive. It's also very clear that Ukraine did not get all of the other equipment they needed to successfully use that small amount of mine clearing equipment, and sending more at this point, at this late stage of the offensive, seems more like optics in public relations than an actual genuine attempt to enhance Ukraine's ability to clear minefields. Next on the list is tube launched optically tracked wire guided missiles, TOW missiles. These are anti-tank missiles. They're somewhat cumbersome compared to more modern systems. They are quite old, but still capable anti-tank systems. To use them most effectively, they should be mounted on a vehicle. The Bradley infantry fighting vehicles the US sent to Ukraine did have TOW missile launchers, so perhaps it's for whatever remains of Ukraine's Bradley fighting vehicle inventory. I also want to remind people that the US sent a huge number of TOW anti-tank missiles to Syria, to the militants and extremists to use against the Syrian Arab army. It failed to turn the tide of that conflict, and I feel that it is not going to turn the tide here up against the Russian military, which is much larger, better armed, better trained than the Syrian Arab army. Next on the list is Javelin and other anti-armor systems and rockets. So it's just a grab bag of anti-armor systems that they can send to Ukraine. The Javelin was sent in very large numbers in the opening months of the special military operation. And then it was very public knowledge that they quickly depleted their stockpiles. They drew up contracts with the manufacturers who make the Javelin missile, and the contractor said it's going to take us years to refill those stockpiles. So the number of Javelin missile systems going to Ukraine is probably now very closely related to production numbers, which are not high. Next on the list is Hydra 70 rockets. These are unguided rockets used in an air-to-ground role. There is a Drive article about this, as a matter of fact, August 1st, 2023. Ukraine's Mi-24, these are attack helicopters, are now armed with US 70mm Hydra rockets. And they have a little picture here of what this all looks like and how it's mounted on the helicopter. It says, as the conflict in the country has ground on, Ukraine's attack helicopters and armed transport helicopters have generally been observed firing volleys of unguided rockets indirectly at Russian positions. And what this looks like is the helicopter goes up, fires the rockets. It's not pointing them at any target directly. They're being fired. They arc and then hit the general area where the target is thought to be. Very imprecise way to use rockets that are already unguided. It says Ukrainian Su-25 Frogfoot ground attack jets have been employing more or less the same tactics, including now in strikes using US supplied unguided 5-inch Zuni rockets. So very, very similar, all unguided rockets. Russian armed helicopters have also been observed doing the same, which offer questionable results in terms of accuracy, but are intended to help reduce the launching aircraft's vulnerability to enemy air defenses. In other words, this is very, very inaccurate. This is not going to have any sort of significant effect on the battlefield. And they're saying, yes, Russia is also doing it, but just keep in mind, Russia has many more helicopters and aircraft to do this with. So however inaccurate it is, the more you fire, the more likely you are to hit something. Ukraine has a very small handful of aircraft doing this much less frequently. The results will be minimum, if not negligible entirely. It also says, as the U.S. transfer of stocks of Zunis, the delivery of thousands of Hydras to Ukraine is also a reflection of the dwindling stockpiles of comparable Soviet-designed unguided aircraft rockets in the country. And this is another illustration of just how absolutely dependent Ukraine has become on the U.S. and the rest of NATO for absolutely everything, not just main battle tanks and artillery and multiple launch rocket systems, but absolutely everything. Ukraine is running out of absolutely everything. And as this grinds on, they are more and more dependent on the West, not less. Some people might have heard in recent days, Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky claiming that Ukrainian military industrial production is expanding and they'll be making all kinds of new weapon systems and ammunition. This is a fantasy. They're not going to be doing that. And the reality is, if and when the West cuts off Ukraine, that is going to lead to a rapid collapse of Ukraine's fighting capacity. Next on this Pentagon list, this assistance package, it says over 3 million rounds of small arms ammunition. And I bring this point up over and over and over again. When people hear the word million, they think, wow, that is an awful lot. But then you have to understand the reality of this. A typical soldier may have around 210 rounds on them, a magazine in their rifle, and then load it out on their gear. And that's not even going to get you through a whole firefight. It's not going to get you through a whole firefight, let alone an entire day of heavy fighting. If you think about a single Ukrainian brigade having about 4,000 troops, 3 million rounds is enough for 3 brigades for less than a single day of actual intense fighting. Just to put it in perspective, it is not that much. And you have to remember, in modern combat, it is not one shot, one kill. You will see soldiers spraying bullets everywhere. Thousands and thousands, if not tens of thousands of rounds are fired for every one that actually hits something critical. Next on the list is armored medical treatment vehicles and high mobility multi-purpose wheeled vehicles, Humvees, used as ambulances. And why do you need more ambulances if you're winning? If you're killing far more Russians than you're losing, as is still being claimed, and if you have already this well-established and tremendous advantage over Russia in terms of battlefield medicine, why is this necessary? Why do you need more ambulances? A lot of people have been making these claims that Ukraine has superior battlefield medicine. This is the reason why they're losing far fewer troops than Russia. But of course, this is all a myth, and none of this adds up. It is just war propaganda. And then finally on the list is demolitions, munitions for obstacle clearing, and spare parts, maintenance, and other field equipment. Again, demolition munitions for obstacle clearing. This is what Ukraine needed to have on hand before they launched their offensive. So either they didn't have enough on hand, or they thought they had enough on hand for a very short-term offensive that they thought was going to be much more successful, and then it ended up not being, and now they need much more to continue on. That is a conclusion that you can draw from this. And then we have this from the State Department linked to this new package of additional U.S. military assistance for Ukraine. This is a statement by U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken, and it says down here, Russia started this war and could end it at any time by withdrawing its forces from Ukraine and stopping its brutal attacks. Until it does, the United States and our allies and partners will stand united with Ukraine for as long as it takes. But this is, what is this? Is this a bluff for Russia to consider, or is this for public consumption? Because in reality, it's not going to be for as long as it takes. It's going to be for as long as the U.S. has artillery shells, tanks, unguided rockets, all of these things that they're sending Ukraine. When that it's not ever going to completely run out, but when it dips down to levels that cannot sustain even the minimum rate of fire Ukraine needs to achieve to impede the advance of Russian troops, when it dips down to that level, that's as long as possible. It's not as long as it takes. Hey, let's go look at another Forbes article here. Not to pick on Forbes and to pick on David Axe, but it's just convenient that he wrote all of these articles that just so happen to line up with all the narratives. And he's very concise and very specific, which paints him into a lot of corners when all of this fails to add up. The article is titled, "To Free Up Another 100 Leopard 1 Tanks for Ukraine, German Diplomats Are Getting Creative." And this is a Leopard 1 tank. It is the predecessor of the Leopard 2 tank. The Duran has already talked about this deal. And it's about Leopard 1 tanks in Switzerland that Switzerland refuses to transfer to Ukraine. So the German government is asking Greece to send 100 of their Leopard 1 tanks to Ukraine, and in return they will give them refurbished Leopard 1 tanks to replace them. Now, I've gone over the Leopard 1 tank before. It's a post-World War II tank. It was designed in the mid-50s and 60s. It went into service in the 1960s. And so it is the predecessor of the Leopard 2, which we just watched fail catastrophically on the battlefield amid this offensive. It's very lightly armored. Even for tanks of that day, it was very lightly armored because it was trying to emphasize mobility, and it is very lightly armed compared to modern main battle tanks. It has a 105 millimeter main gun versus the 125 millimeter main guns Russian main battle tanks have, modern Russian main battle tanks have. Now, the particular variant of Leopard 1 that Greece has on hand that they would be sending to Ukraine seems to have been updated sometime in the late 1990s or maybe early to like 2000 or 2001. It was updated, and so it has a fire control computer, laser rangefinder that works with the computer, and also thermal sights that allow you to operate in bad weather and at night. But this is going to be very old technology, over 20 years old. And what you're going to end up with by sending a much less capable tank than the Leopard 2, which already completely failed, is you're going to just have more tanks burning on the battlefield and leading to the deaths of Ukrainians who are trying to operate them, and Ukrainian soldiers who depend on that tank fulfilling a role that it cannot fulfill. And it's going to be a lot like the AMX-10RC, these so-called French tanks that were actually wheeled. They had a 105 millimeter gun. They were lightly armed, and they were all destroyed. They broke down. Some of them were captured. At least one of them is on display in Russia right now. That is what's going to happen to these Leopard 1 tanks. And that's where the West is right now. They're digging deeper and deeper into their existing stockpiles. And as they do that, they're digging deeper and deeper into history. The older and older equipment that they have laying around that they're sending to Ukraine simply because they have nothing else more appropriate to send. And when we use the word appropriate, we can see that even the newer weapon systems that they have already transferred to Ukraine were in no way appropriate. And I've gone over this many times. You cannot just send Ukraine Leopard 2s, Challenger 2s, M1 Abrams tanks. You cannot just send them to Ukraine after a few weeks or months of training and expect them to use them effectively on the battlefield. It does not work that way. In reality, it takes years to integrate, 2 or 3 years at least, to integrate a new weapon system somewhat effectively in a modern army to perform effectively in combined arms warfare. That is the reality of it. And this goes all the way back to US Secretary of State Antony Blinken saying, as long as it takes, this mantra that we've heard from the US and the rest of NATO, their will to continue indefinitely is very much confined by the material realities of how much longer they can actually supply Ukraine in this proxy war against Russia. So that is it for now. I will continue keeping an eye on all of this. If you thought this video was useful, please like and share. Think about subscribing. It's free to do. It helps the channel grow. Please check the video description below for other places you can find and follow my work. I would highly suggest you follow me on Telegram. I am posting absolutely everything there, including full-length videos that you can watch. It is a backup for YouTube. It's also a backup for Rumble, which apparently is having issues right now. A lot of my most recent videos are not uploading on Rumble for some reason, and other people have had this problem. In the video description below are all of the links that I have gone over in this video, so please check them out and see for yourself all of the things that I'm talking about. There are also ways in the video description below where you can help support my work. I do not monetize my YouTube channel. If an ad ever pops up while watching one of my YouTube videos, please feel free to skip it because it's not helping me out at all. If you do want to support my work, please do so through Buy Me a Coffee and also Patreon. To everyone who is helping support my work, whether it's through one-time donations, month-to-month donations, or even if you're just sharing my work with others, helping get the word out there, that helps a lot. I could not do this work without that support, so thank you very much. And as always, thank you for watching.